Sometime in the 12th century BCE, in the hill country and valleys of central Canaan, the tribes of Israel live without a king, governed by tribal elders and, in times of crisis, by temporary military leaders the text calls judges. This account comes from the book of Judges, chapters 6 through 8, in the Hebrew Bible, which remains the only detailed record of what happens here. The wider region is under real pressure during this century. Egyptian and Anatolian records describe famine and grain shortages across the eastern Mediterranean around this time, and pollen studies from Israel point to the same pattern locally. This is also the period in which the Sea Peoples are pressing into the eastern Mediterranean and the old late Bronze Age powers are losing control of the region. So the raids about to be described are part of a wider pattern of upheaval, not an isolated event. Against that backdrop, for 7 years, a coalition of Midianite raiders, Amalekites, and other peoples from the eastern desert has crossed the Jordan River every year at harvest time, moved into Israelite territory, and taken the grain, the livestock, and anything else worth carrying away before withdrawing back east. The text describes these raids reaching all the way to Gaza. Families have started hiding their remaining food in mountain caves and dugout shelters. Some fields go unplanted, since a harvest left standing in the open is a harvest the raiders will simply take. Without a harvest, there is no food stored for winter and no seed left for the following year. Israelite communities in the affected region are described as reduced to poverty by these repeated invasions. The book of Judges describes this as a recurring pattern across the period. The tribes adopt the religious practices of the peoples around them, are handed over to a foreign power as a consequence, cry out once the pressure becomes unbearable, and are given a temporary leader to deliver them, after which peace lasts only until the cycle repeats. The Midianite oppression is simply the latest turn of that cycle, and by the account's own description, one of the most damaging so far. Two forces are about to meet in the Jezreel Valley in the north of this territory. One is a coalition built from Midian, Amalek, and allied peoples from the east, arriving with thousands of camels and, by one count in the text, something in the range of 135,000 men. Camel-mounted raiders can travel faster and farther than infantry-based defenders can easily respond to, part of why this coalition has been able to strike deep into Israelite territory each year and withdraw before local forces can organize against it. The other is an Israelite militia that starts this account at 32,000 men and ends it with 300. By the end of this account, you will see how that smaller number accomplishes what the larger one could not, and why one of the largest raiding forces to cross into Israelite territory in this period never raids the harvest again. When the Israelites cry out over their situation, the text says, a prophet is sent to them first, before any military leader arrives. His message is not a plan of attack. It reminds them that this same God brought their ancestors out of slavery in Egypt, out of the hand of the Egyptians and everyone else who oppressed them, and gave them this land freely. It also asks a direct question. Why, after all of that, are they now worshiping the gods of the Amorites, in whose land they are living? Only after that reminder does the account turn to the man who will lead the counterattack. Gideon, son of Joash, lives in a town called Ophrah and is a member of the clan of Abiezer in the tribe of Manasseh. When he is introduced, he is beating out wheat inside a winepress instead of on an open threshing floor, working out of sight so that Midianite raiders passing nearby will not notice the grain and take it. A messenger sits down under a nearby oak tree and speaks to him directly. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon looks around before answering, as if checking who else might be within earshot. "If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are the wonders our fathers told us about when they say the Lord brought them out of Egypt? Now he has abandoned us and handed us over to Midian. He is told to go and save Israel with the strength he already has." Gideon answers that his clan is the weakest in Manasseh and that he himself is the least significant member of his father's house. He asks for a sign before he commits to anything and asks the messenger to wait while he prepares an offering. He brings out meat and unleavened bread and sets them on a rock as instructed. The messenger touches the food with the tip of a staff. Fire rises from the rock itself and consumes the offering, and the messenger is gone. Gideon builds an altar on that same spot and names it, "The Lord is Peace." He still has not fought anyone. That same night, Gideon is given a second task. one that has nothing to do with the Midianites directly. His own father, Joash, has built an altar to Baal in the town, with a wooden pole to Asherah standing next to it. Gideon is told to tear both down and build a proper altar to the Lord in their place, using a second bull from his father's herd as an offering, with wood from the Asherah pole to burn it. He does this at night with 10 of his own servants, specifically because he is afraid of what his father's household and the men of the town will do to him if they see him during the day. In the morning, the men of the town find the altar destroyed, ask around, and are told that Gideon did it. They gather at Joash's door and demand that he hand over his son to be killed for it. Joash stands in the doorway and refuses them directly. Are you going to fight Baal's battles for him? Whoever takes up his cause will be dead by morning. If Baal is a god, let him contend for himself, since it is his own altar that was torn down. From that day, Gideon is also called Jerubbaal, a name built around that same sentence, meaning roughly, let Baal contend against him. No one moves against him again. Soon after, the Midianite coalition crosses the Jordan again, together with the Amalekites and other eastern peoples, and makes camp in the valley of Jezreel. This time, Gideon responds directly. He sounds a trumpet, and the men of his own clan, the Abiezrites, gather behind him. He sends messengers through the rest of Manasseh, and further out to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, calling their fighting men to join him. Men begin arriving from 4 different tribes over the following days, under their own local leaders, with no shared chain of command beyond Gideon himself, and no history of fighting together as one force. Before committing any of them to battle, Gideon asks for 2 further confirmations, despite everything he has already seen. He lays a wool fleece on the threshing floor overnight and asks that dew fall only on the fleece, leaving the ground around it dry. In the morning, he wrings a full bowl of water out of the fleece while the surrounding ground is dry. Still not satisfied, he asks for the reverse the following night, dew on the ground and a dry fleece, and wakes to find it exactly as he asked. Only after that does he move his gathered men toward the coalition camp. Gideon and his men rise early and make camp beside the spring of Harod, at the foot of Mount Gilboa, on the southern edge of the Jezreel Valley. Across the valley to the north, on the slope of the hill of Moreh, the Midianite coalition has made its own camp. At night, the fires of that camp are visible spread across a wide stretch of the valley floor, far more of them than Gideon's own camp can show in return. The text describes the coalition's numbers and its camels as too great to count by looking. Scholars note that the Hebrew word usually translated as 1,000 in this period could also refer to a smaller military unit or a clan grouping, rather than the number 1,000 exactly. So modern estimates of the true size of either army vary. What the text is clear about is the relative gap. Whatever the precise numbers, the coalition camped at Moreh significantly outnumbers the Israelites gathered at Harod. And anyone standing at Harod at night looking north can see that difference without needing an exact count. Before anything else happens, Gideon is told that his own army is a problem. You have too many men with you. If I hand Midian over to all of you, Israel will say its own strength saved it, and not mine. Or Gideon is told to announce that any man who is afraid may turn back home and leave the camp. 22,000 men leave that day, close to 70 out of every 100 who had gathered. 10,000 remain. For Gideon, this is not the relief it might sound like. His force has just lost more than 2 out of every 3 men, and the coalition camped across the valley has not gotten any smaller in the meantime. He now has to consider leading 10,000 men against a force that outnumbers even the original 32,000 by a wide margin. He is told there are still too many, and is sent down to the water with the remaining 10,000 for a second test. Separate everyone who laps the water with his tongue, like a dog, from everyone who kneels down and drinks normally. 10,000 men file down to the stream in turn. Most kneel at the water's edge and drink in the ordinary way, faces down, attention on the water in front of them. 300 lift water to their mouths with one hand instead, staying upright, watching the coalition camp across the valley as they drink rather than putting their faces down to the stream. Gideon is told these 300 are the ones who will fight. Everyone else is sent home, taking their own provisions and the trumpets that had been issued to them earlier in the muster. Gideon is now left with 300 men, in view of a coalition force many times that size, with no further test left to reduce anyone and no larger army left in reserve if this fails. By this stage, Gideon's own fear has been treated as an assumed part of the plan at almost every step, from the fire that confirmed his first sign, to the 2 nights spent testing the fleece, never hidden and never held against him. That pattern continues now. That night, Gideon is told to go down toward the coalition camp himself, because the outcome of the battle is about to be confirmed to him directly. He is also given a choice. If he is still afraid, he can bring his servant Purah down with him first, and listen to what is being said in the enemy camp before he has to commit his 300 men to anything. Gideon takes Purah and goes. They move down from Harod in the dark, across open ground that offers no real cover, toward a camp large enough that its outer edges are not fully visible even at close range. Tents and sleeping men stretch out in every direction they can make out. Near the perimeter, close enough to hear ordinary conversation, Gideon overhears one soldier describing a dream to another. "I dreamed that a loaf of barley bread came tumbling into our camp. It struck a tent hard enough to turn it over, and the tent collapsed flat." The second man answers without hesitation, "That can only be the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given Midian and this whole camp into his hand." Gideon has just heard 2 enemy soldiers, with no idea anyone is listening, describe his own victory before it happens. He bows down where he is standing. Then he and Purah return to the Israelite camp, and he wakes his 300 men. "Get up. The Lord has given the camp of Midian into your hands." Gideon divides the 300 into 3 groups of 100 each, and positions them to surround the camp rather than approach it from one side. With numbers this small against a force this size, a direct approach from any single direction would let the coalition see exactly how few attackers there actually are. He gives every man a trumpet, likely a ram's horn of the kind normally used to call the tribes to muster, along with an empty clay jar and a torch to place inside the jar, hiding the flame from view until the jar breaks. The instructions are direct. "Watch me and do exactly what I do. When I reach the edge of the camp and blow my trumpet, all of you blow your trumpets too from every position around the camp. Then shout, 'A sword for the Lord and for Gideon.' No conventional weapons are issued beyond the 300 trumpets and 300 torches. The entire plan depends on noise and light arriving at once from every direction, aimed at a camp that is not expecting an attack of any kind, let alone one from 3 sides at the same time, and that has no way of knowing from sound and light alone whether it is facing 300 men or considerably more. The 3 companies take their positions around the coalition camp at the start of the middle watch, close to 10 o'clock at night, just after a change of guard. At that hour, the night has already been divided into 3 watches, which would put roughly a third of the camp walking back in from duty, a third walking out to replace them, and the rest still asleep in their tents. At Gideon's signal, all 300 men blow their trumpets at once, smash their jars against the ground, and lift their torches into the open air. 300 torches appear at the same moment around the edge of the camp, along with 300 trumpets and a single line shouted from every direction at once. "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Each man stays exactly where he is standing. None of the 300 advance into the camp itself, and none of them need to. Inside, the coalition camp becomes confused and disordered within moments. Soldiers cannot tell how many attackers surround them, since the sound and the torchlight are arriving from every side of a dark, crowded camp at once, and 300 trumpets sounding together can easily be mistaken for 3,000. Men walking back in from guard duty run into men rushing out of their tents in a panic, neither group able to identify the other clearly in the dark. Some men, only half awake, reach for weapons before they are fully alert and strike at the first moving shape nearby. Any officer trying to organize a response cannot locate the others in the noise, and instructions that might have restored order in daylight go unheard over 300 trumpets sounding from 3 directions at once. Camels, startled by the sudden noise and torchlight, likely add to the disorder, pulling free of their tethers and moving through the camp on their own. Swords are drawn against whoever is closest, and in a camp built from several different peoples, speaking different dialects and wearing different equipment, that often means other Midianite, Amalekite, or allied soldiers rather than Israelites, since no Israelite has actually entered the camp at any point. The text states this outcome directly. The Lord set every man's sword against his companion throughout the camp, whatever combination of noise, darkness, and surprise produced it. The result is a coalition force many times larger than 300 men beginning to fight itself before a single Israelite soldier crosses into the camp. Survivors break away from the fighting and run east toward the Jordan River in the direction of Beth Shittah, Zerera, and the border of Abel Mahola near Tabbath. No longer an organized army, but scattered men trying to reach the river before anyone catches them. Gideon calls up men from Naphtali, Asher, and the rest of Manasseh to join the pursuit as it moves east. He also sends messengers south into the hill country of Ephraim with an urgent request: come down against Midian and take control of the water crossings ahead of the fleeing coalition, as far as Beth-barah and the Jordan River itself. Controlling those crossings matters because the surviving coalition forces are trying to reach the eastern side of the Jordan, back toward familiar territory where they can regroup. Cutting off the fords traps them on the western side, within reach of the pursuing Israelites, with the river itself blocking any further retreat. The men of Ephraim respond and move to hold the crossings before the fleeing coalition arrives. In the process, they capture 2 Midianite commanders, a man named Oreb, meaning raven, and a man named Zeb, meaning wolf. Oreb is killed at a rock that will carry his name from that point forward. Zeb is killed at a winepress that will carry his. The men of Ephraim carry both heads back across the Jordan and present them to Gideon, who is still on the near side of the river himself. Afterward, the men of Ephraim confront Gideon directly, unhappy that they were not called to the fight from the beginning, when it would have meant more credit and more of the plunder for their tribe. Gideon answers them without escalating the dispute. What have I really accomplished compared to you? Is not the gleaning of Ephraim's grapes better than the full grape harvest of Abiezer? God gave Oreb and Zeb into your hands. What was I able to do compared to that? The complaint settles, and the coalition of Israelite tribes that fought this battle together stays together afterward. That is where the book of Judges closes its account of the battle itself. But the pursuit does not end there. The next chapter follows Gideon and his exhausted 300 east across the Jordan, still chasing 2 Midianite kings, Zebah and Zalmunna, along with whatever remains of the coalition around them. Along the way, Gideon asks the towns of Succoth and Penuel for bread for his men, who are described as worn out but still pursuing. Both towns refuse him, apparently doubting that 300 exhausted men will actually catch 2 kings, and Gideon tells both towns he will return. He goes on to surprise the remaining coalition force at a place called Karkor, catching it off guard. The text puts that remaining force at about 15,000 men, out of a coalition it earlier puts at roughly 135,000, meaning most of the original force is already gone by the time Gideon catches up with what is left of it. Zebah and Zalmunna are captured there. On his way back, Gideon makes good on his warning to Succoth and Penuel, punishing both towns for refusing him. He then questions the 2 captured kings directly about his own brothers, whom they had killed earlier at Tabor, and kills both kings himself after his own son, still young, hesitates to do it. He also takes the crescent-shaped ornaments that had been hanging from the necks of the king's camels. With the deaths of Zebah and Zalmunna, the coalition that had controlled the harvest season in Israelite territory for 7 straight years stops raiding the region altogether. The book of Judges records that Midian is subdued before the Israelites, and that there is no more war in the region for 40 years. In the Jezreel Valley, farmers go back to threshing their grain out in the open, on ordinary threshing floors, in daylight, for the first time since the raids began. The defeat becomes a reference point in later Hebrew poetry, well after Gideon's own lifetime. Isaiah refers back to the slaughter of Midian at the rock of Oreb as a standard for how completely an oppressor can be defeated, and a psalm asks that a later set of enemies be dealt with the way Midian, Zebah, and Zalmunna once were. Centuries after 300 men stood around a camp at night with jars and torches, that night is still being used as the example of what a decisive, one-sided deliverance looks like. One additional detail has emerged from outside the biblical text itself. In 2019, archaeologists working at Khirbet al-Rai near Lachish in southern Israel found a pottery fragment inscribed with the name Jerubbaal, dated to around 1100 BCE, close to the period in which Gideon's story is generally placed. It is the earliest known appearance of that specific name outside the Bible. Because the site is nearly 100 miles from the Jezreel Valley where Gideon's story takes place, researchers are cautious about connecting the two directly, and some suggest the inscription may belong to a different person who happened to share the name. Even so, it confirms that the name was in genuine use during this period, in a story that otherwise survives through a single written source.